So today I thought we'd go through all of the trainers and supporter cards that you want to use in each of your decks. We're going to run through all of them and just basically go through the fundamentals of the game, which ones you actually want to have in your deck or you want to actually pick up to start the deck. So let's jump in and hopefully you enjoy. So let's start with the actual trainers first. These are going to be supporter cards. So for instance, someone like Misty, it doesn't matter if you've got the full art of it or just the generic trainer item. Now obviously with this, the biggest thing that you're going to get is the fact that if you flip heads, you will get 1 energy. If you can continuously do that by sheer luck, it doesn't seem to work, you will get as much energies as you do go with the heads. Now obviously with supporter cards you can only use 1 per turn, which is kind of going down to your strategy of do you draw 2 cards, do you use the Misty, do you use Giovanni, and that's kind of be the strategic side of it. Strategic side of it. So Misty in general is going to be great for a water deck only. It only works for water, so just to make sure that you are obviously using the right deck for some of these. Obviously with her, it is total RNG based. There is no guarantee of one. If you get a Tails on the very first turn, then obviously the card does nothing, and unfortunately that is, or it seems to be, the look of Misty at the moment. If you get her on the very first turn, you could potentially get yourselves up on an Articuno, for instance, on the full Blizzard. You could literally get 2 heads, get the second turn in, obviously put your energy on it, and there you go. You are pretty much set up to the max instantly. So a very, very big card when it comes to a water deck, and a must-have. Not a card I see a lot, but Blaine, again, is going to go for the fire deck, and obviously a lot of these trainers, or at least gym leaders, do tend to go with their certain type. Blaine obviously had the big fire types at the end, and his one is during this attack, your Ninetales, your Rapidash, or your Magmar do 30 damage more against your opponent's active Pokemon. This one most definitely is a hit and miss. Sometimes it can work, sometimes it's just not worth having as much. Now, depending on if you are running a Ninetales, a Rapidash, a Magmar, I would suggest normally Ninetales and Rapidash are the kind of main 2 that would go. I don't really see too much of a Magmar, and these cards may fall in luck or fall out of luck depending on what comes out in the future as well. Obviously with Blaine, it'll be interesting to see, would he increase when we do eventually get a Magmortar into the deck, and as we do progress into Volume 2, these could have a better meta in the game as such. But Blaine in general is probably one of the ones, even on a fire deck, I'm probably not using them 3 Pokemon, so it doesn't really matter too much. Next up, Koga, a great one. We have seen this so many times at the moment because he basically puts your Muck and your Weezing from the active spot back into your hand. Doesn't matter if they've got 10 HP left, they're poisoned, they're paralyzed, they're sleeping. You can go and put that supporter card on and bring whatever of them 2 back into your hand, and you can use them again. Obviously you've got to have something on the bench, but it's great if you are using, for instance, a Weezing or a Grimer deck to be able to poison the opponent's Pokemon and then bring them back, swap in something else to then be able to, for instance, Wigglytuff, put them to sleep. You could paralyze them. Arbok has a pretty good meta on this as well, so it is a very more technical deck when it comes to setting up, but it's very good to be able to take the damage but then almost not use the potion and bring it back to put it back in. Obviously you still need to go through the 2-tier evolution, so if you've got Muck or Weezing, bring it back into your hand, you've got to put Grimer and Coffin in first, and then the next turn you can obviously go ahead again. You can obviously only have 2 of each as well, 2 each of the supporters, items, Pokemon, so it can only be used twice per game if it does come out in your hand, but a very good one if you are looking at that poison, sleep, paralyze strategy. We then have Erica. Now, she's probably used more on your Venusaur or Executor deck because she heals 50 damage from one of your grass Pokemon. Again, very specific with these trainers, or at least these supporter trainers, because obviously they have their own kind of field of interest, and obviously you want to utilize them per deck. If you've got a mixed deck, this could make them a little bit more interesting to try and use, but the remainder of the trainers other than Brock do have kind of a multi-use surface, which we're going to go ahead with. Erica's great with a Venusaur deck. I don't see why you wouldn't try and do that with obviously the heal 50. The only difference is depending on what Pokemon you're using. Predominantly in a grass deck at the moment, we're seeing a lot of just Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, and then obviously Execute and Executor. There is a couple others that you can use. Lilligant is another good one. So if you wanted to go with that, you could go with the 2 Executor and also Lilligant. And then obviously you've got more room for some trainers that can obviously do some damage and also heal your Pokemon. So a decent one you could look, I'd say a moderate level of use. We then have Brock. Now, for me, I'd probably say this is the least used, kind of behind Blaine as well, because not many people are going to be using Golem and Onyx. Maybe, like I said, if we do get into Steelix and we get... Well, I mean, Golem's kind of the same. I suppose a Alolan Golem could be potential, but again, I don't know if that's going to then change over to them too, because obviously their type changes as well. Obviously, Steelix goes into Steel, so it will be interesting to see how that does go, but Brock isn't necessarily a big used card in my opinion. He obviously takes a fighting energy from your energy zone and attaches it to Golem or Onyx, so it's a guaranteed, whereas Misty is a coin flip and you can get as many as possible. Brock is just that one in there, and it could help you get to the 2 energy sources or get 3, and you'll be able to make that attack straight away. And I completely forgot about Lieutenant Surge. He obviously moves all energy from your benched Pokemon to your Raichu, Electrode, or Electabuzz in the active spot. So if I've got a Zapdos, a Pikachu, a Zebra trying to think of another one, in the bench, and they've got, say, 4 energies across all of them. They've got 1, 1, and 2. You could then take all of them energies and basically in your spot, if you've got a Raichu, an Electrode, or an Electabuzz that you've had to bring in, you'll be able to take all of them energies in one turn and put it straight on, meaning you can attack instantaneously. Again, I don't really see people using that in the kind of the electric deck. It's a lot of Pikachu, Zapdos, Zebra, and that's all you kind of need, really. A lot of people are now just going for the double Pikachu EX, a normal Pikachu and a Zapdos, because you don't need anything else with it. The main issue is to try and get Pika in. I suppose you could go with a Raichu as an evolution for Pika EX, if that does work. I'm pretty sure that works. I don't know why it wouldn't. But then obviously you could do that to then stop the 2 points. But again, I've not really seen that strategy. Predominantly, it's either Pikachu EX and Zapdos, or that's really it. Which then leads us to Sabrina. This is a definite must in any deck. Absolutely fantastic. Switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to your bench, or to their bench. Your opponent chooses the new active Pokemon. So this is going to be great if you need to just take a breather. You pray that they don't have an item to combat this. I will go over that in a second, but this is a great one if you just need a second. If you've started first and maybe they've kind of got the upper hand and they don't have the XP to bring it back in. If, say, they've got, for instance, a Mewtwo deck, they've got a Charizard kind of powering up, you could then just slap them with this. They have to then change out, which means that they have to have a retreat cost on their other Pokemon. The main thing is, if they've got a retreat cost on their bench Pokemon of like 2 or 3, and then they don't have the extra energy on it already, it just means you kind of basically stall them for a team, and it's just good to annoy an opponent. So for me, Sabrina is an absolute must in every deck. I normally supply 2 every single deck that you've got, as they always are very useful to have in them scenarios. Which is the final support trainer. We've got Giovanni. Now, very easy for him. During this attack, you are used by your Pokemon. You do 10 plus damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So very, very nice indeed. It means that Zebra, who can obviously hit the bench, it's got to be the active Pokemon. So if you just need that extra 10, you've got Mewtwo hitting a Psycut at 50, and they've got 60 HP left, you put this on, it's an easy 10 points on top. And sometimes them extra little bit of damages really do make the difference in the long haul. Obviously, if you're going for a big hit, like if you're going for Charizard's Crimson Storm, that's not really going to matter. It's hitting 200 regardless. But in them opening minutes where you could potentially take 10 more, that is going to be really good, especially for someone like a Mewtwo with an even 50. If they've got 110, it means you can hit the 50. They think they're okay, add a Giovanni in, and there you go. You've slapped 60 on them and they're goodbye. It's a very nice one to have, and I would say he's leaning towards in a must in the deck to kind of maybe at least having one at a minimum. And the final support card we've got is Professor's Research, an absolute must. It's a very easy one for this. Professor Oak coming with the goods. It is just as simple as drawing 2 cards. It's a nice and easy one. You can use 1 per turn. You can mix that in with the Pokeball, which puts a basic Pokemon in. So I would always go, if I'm looking at a strategic value for that, always do the basic Pokemon first and then do the draw 2 cards. It's just the way I do it. And then obviously if you do get another item after that, you can utilize that again. You can use as many items as you want, but the support cards is just 1 per turn, and that's every single one. Now running through some of the items, we have got the Pokedex. This is look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Now, when it comes to this, I personally don't use a lot of the items. I don't think they're necessarily that useful really in the grand schemes of such a basic deck at the moment. Because we only have 1 volume of cards, we kind of know what people are going with. There's very few people that I've seen personally are using in ranked matches online a multitude of Pokemon in their energy sources. They're only using a fire deck, a electric deck, a Mewtwo deck. Even then, potentially, you're looking at, more than likely, you're looking at 1 energy, so fire, water, grass, electric, psychic, and then you'd see like colorless. You'd see a Kangaskhan, you'd see a Wigglytuff, you'd see potentially a Farfetch. They're the only combinations I'm seeing online consistently. There may be 1 or 2 that do try something different, but predominantly it isn't necessarily a big thing as of yet. So they're looking at your deck. I mean, it's just taking a card space away at this point. So I would say at the moment, it's not really that useful. X speed though, an incredible one. 2 in every single time. During this turn, the retreat cost of your active Pokemon is 1 less. You can use 2 in once if you really have them in your deck or if you have them on your hand. So you can use 2, and if the retreat cost is 2, it will be free to bring him back, and then you could put the energy on the Pokemon that's going in the active field. Obviously, this is going to be great for the basic Pokemon because most of them only require 1 to bring them back anyway. So if you are in a sticky situation where you need to put the energy on an active or a benched Pokemon to bring them in, then obviously you can bring back that Pokemon with no actual cost. I would say 2 in every single deck. And then we have the 3 fossils. We have Old Amber, we have Dome Fossil, and we have Helix Fossil. These are always going to be good uses for the Pokemon side of stuff. They are an item to begin with, and we've obviously got Kabuto, and obviously Omnionite. And then the final one being Aerodactyl. These ones are always quite interesting. Obviously with these they are going to start off as basic Pokemon, so even though they are an item, this is just the first step basic evolution for them. So Aerodactyl would go straight into Old Amber, you'd then have Kabuto and also Omnionite that would go into Kabutops and Omnistar. They are obviously going to be almost like a free tier evolution with how you have to play them in the game, but they can be taken out on the bench or at least switched if Sabrina's played, so you've always got to watch out for that, but it would only take 1 point away anyway. So that's just kind of them 3. Very useful for obviously the decks that do require them Pokemon, but they are semi-useful if you wanted to have a holding space as well. We then have Red Card. Your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck and draws 3 cards. So if you've got an opponent that's drawed 4 cards, but clearly they've not got the card they wanted, they've still got a space on the bench, they've got say 6 or 7 cards in their hand, you use that red card, all of them hands go, the deck gets shuffled, and they basically have 3 cards to be picked out of again. That is a very RNG based one because you could be playing their bluff. They might not have anything they want in there, and then the free cards that do come out could be the free tier evolution that you wanted. If you've ever been looking for a guard and you need the Curlier, if anybody uses the red card, it sometimes can be a blessing because it could just pull out straight away. You could then have the guard go back into your deck, which is a bit unfortunate, or you could get the free tier straight from it. So it is one of them ones. You sometimes get it as a win and sometimes get it as a loss, but I would say if you've got a space, it could be used as a 1, but I wouldn't necessarily miss out if I don't have this in. We have Hand Scope next, which is, again, not a terrible one. Your opponent basically reveals their hand. You can have a look at their cards for X amount of seconds, and you can see what's coming out. Again, with this one, for me, it's one of like the lookup free deck. It can be useful if it's just there, but it depends on what it's taking up a spot from. If I'm having to take out a potion for it, if I'm taking out a Pokeball, or even a Pokemon that could come in quite useful, I would probably say that it's going to have the lesser use, just because you kind of can tell where people are going with their decks, and you just have to basically have the RNG to beat it that way. Otherwise, you kind of have your strategy around it as well. So I would say it's got a use, and most definitely in the future, it's probably a very good use. But I would say at the moment, it's probably not in use in the battles right now. Now, one of the big ones is going to be the potion. We have got the heal 20 damage to one of your Pokemon. You get to choose, and it is just heal 20. So basically, in the whole match, if you do get your 2 potions, which I would suggest in every deck you do have, you get the chance to heal at least 40 damage across 2 different items. This one's always going to be perfect. It is just an everyday heal, so I personally would go with this as much as you can in every single deck. And the final item we have got in the whole deck at the moment is the Pokeball. A nice and easy one. Put one random basic Pokemon from your deck into your hands. If you have no basic Pokemon left, but you still have a Pokeball, it will just not have an effect. It doesn't pull anything out of thin air. It just won't have any use. So if you have all of the tiers of Guard, Curlier, you have a Raichu in your hand, and you need a basic Pokemon, and you know that you've only got 3 different basic Pokemon, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of pulling it. A lot of the time, if I'm using, obviously, a Mewtwo deck, it's going to be Mewtwo or Ralts. So I know I'm getting the ball running with at least one of them, so it is an absolutely crucial item to have in your deck every single time. I'll have 2. It's an absolute must. So there is definitely some must and must nots in items and supports, and we'll also do this list again once we get some more items in, as it gets a little bit more complicated as we run through Pokemon TCG Pocket. Hopefully this gives a good explanation. Peace.